which is almost as interesting.
In a trick that seems to define his personal style as a magician, Teller silently swallows 100 sewing needles, 6 feet of thread, and makes them reappear.
I saw Teller do the needles, and I thought it was the greatest trick I'd ever seen because it was this geeked out, disgusting carny trick that dealt with vomit, and yet he did it really classy. He did it so classy that you could do it at Carnegie Hall and get away with it.
The trick is based on an ancient East Indian illusion made famous by Houdini, but Teller has found a way to make it his own.
Teller does it brilliantly. When he swallows the final needle and sort of gets it down, a look comes over his face of sort of blissful completion that makes me laugh every time he does it, and I've seen it a lot of times. He is an enormously skilled magician, an enormously creative magician, even though he doesn't do things with great flourishes.
Another trick that bears Teller's signature is called shadows. It's a trick unlike any you're likely to see, and was developed by him when he was still a teenager.
He was sitting in his room in candlelight. He was a rather melodramatic teenager, and he had some blocks from his childhood, and they were casting a shadow on the wall, and he pushed the blocks and you could see the shadow move, and then it said, what a great effect.
Shadows is probably the best bit in our show. It's a perfect example of a trick that you have the image you want. And the image doesn't have to be a rose falling apart from the shadow, but something falling apart, the shadow being more important than that.
The first time I saw Teller do the shadow illusion, I actually cried. There are moments when magic is so poetic that it just catches me.
Nobody knows how it's done, and no one will figure it out, but that doesn't matter. You could do it a much, much simpler way, and the idea is so great and so powerful and so interesting that people would fool themselves just to make that image be real to them.
The notion of envisioning that illusion and carrying it out so beautifully, so delicately and small and simple. I've seen it at least a dozen times live, and it always gets me.
It was beautiful. It was a magnificent, simplistic-looking piece that suddenly something happened that you didn't expect. And it was also kind of gory, and that aspect of it was also beautiful.
When he's not performing, Teller takes refuge in his self-styled home.